I spent my childhood in Lexington, Massachusetts, in a modest colonial with 4 bedrooms, a swing set out back, and those white shutters that made the whole street look like a postcard. But inside, our family revolved almost completely around my older brother Ethan. From the moment he arrived 2 years before me, he became the shining center of my parents' universe, and the evidence was everywhere. Entire shelves in the living room displayed his baseball trophies, team photos, and framed report cards with teachers' glowing comments written in flowing script. When he outgrew one bedroom theme, my parents eagerly redecorated. First rockets, then sports pennants, finally a teenager's retreat with navy walls and a new desk. My room stayed pale yellow with the same twin bed and curtains I'd had since kindergarten. Gifts told their own story. One Christmas, Ethan unwrapped a baseball signed by the Red Sox, a treasure that earned gasps of delight from my father. When my turn came, I got a thick dictionary, still stiff from the store. "You love words," my mother said as I turned its heavy pages. I did, but even at 10 years old, I knew it wasn't the same as a signed ball held aloft like a crown jewel. School achievements hardly shifted the balance. When I won the regional science fair with a project on solar cells, my parents offered distracted congratulations and hurried off to Ethan's doubleheader that same afternoon. I learned quickly that my value was measured by how neatly I fit their picture of the golden son and his capable, accommodating sister. By the time I was 13, I stopped expecting applause. Instead, I began storing away a quiet, private resolve that if love in my house was conditional, my future would not be. And that future began unexpectedly in my grandmother's kitchen. My grandmother, Margaret Warren, had a way of seeing me when no one else bothered to look. She had worked as an accountant in Boston back when women in that field were rare, and though retired by the time I was a teenager, her sharpness never dulled. While my parents hovered over Ethan's baseball practices, I often walked the half-mile to her tidy brick house, where the scent of cinnamon rolls always seemed to linger. One afternoon, when I was 15, she set aside her knitting needles and asked if I knew what compound interest was. I shook my head, expecting a lecture, but she pulled out a yellow notepad and began sketching numbers with her fountain pen. "Imagine you put $100 in the bank," she said, explaining how it grew over time if left untouched. The way her pen danced across the page made it feel like magic, though she reminded me it was nothing but math and patience. I went home that evening and emptied my babysitting earnings into a savings account. It wasn't much, but the act itself felt like claiming a piece of independence. Over the next few years, Grandma nurtured that instinct. She gave me articles to read, helped me buy my first modest stocks, and reminded me that discipline mattered more than flashes of luck. When she passed away suddenly during my junior year of college, I was devastated. My parents assumed her small estate would be divided equally, but her attorney revealed she had left me everything, $50,000. My father immediately suggested I share it with Ethan to ease the cost of his graduate program. My mother nodded in agreement. I refused. "She gave this to me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I invested every cent exactly as she had taught me, knowing she would have approved. Her final words to me, spoken during our last visit, echoed in my head. "Wealth whispers. It doesn't shout." Those whispers became the foundation of the life I would later build, even as I kept them hidden. By the time I graduated, the quiet discipline she instilled in me had already begun to shape 2 separate lives. College marked the first true split between Ethan's world and mine. He headed to a private university in Connecticut, the kind of place where tuition alone could buy a starter home. My parents covered every cent, proudly driving him to campus with a car full of brand new furnishings. I, on the other hand, earned a full scholarship to UMass Amherst. My father dropped me off with 2 suitcases and a box of secondhand supplies, telling me I'd figure it out. I did. Most mornings I worked the opening shift at the campus coffee shop before classes. Weekends, I logged hours at the library or tutored students in economics. The exhaustion was constant, but I held on to perfect grades, determined never to waste what Grandma had given me. Finance became more than a major. It was a lifeline, a way to build the kind of independence no one could strip away. During my junior summer, I landed an internship in New York City with a respected investment firm. The energy of Manhattan, the towers, the rush of Wall Street, lit something in me that never dimmed. After graduation, I accepted a junior analyst position at Blackstone. The salary was modest, but the exposure was invaluable. I rented a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, lived on takeout, and invested half my paycheck. By 26, after years of relentless saving and studying market patterns, I took the leap. I started my own boutique firm, focusing on undervalued companies in emerging industries. At first, it was just me in a cramped co-working space. But opportunities came quickly: a biotech startup, a renewable energy firm, a small tech acquisition. Each risk multiplied what I had built. By 32, my net worth quietly reached $13 million. Outwardly, nothing changed when I visited home. I drove rental cars instead of my Tesla, wore plain clothes instead of designer, and deflected questions about my job with vague answers. The mask was necessary, or so I told myself. But every year it grew heavier, and when Michael entered my life, he was the first to notice the weight I carried. I met Michael Carver at a charity event in the city. One of those evenings where industry people clink glasses under dim lighting and pretend to network casually. He wasn't part of finance. He was an architect with a practice in Manhattan, known for designing spaces that combined elegance with functionality. What drew me in wasn't his resume, but his ease. He listened, really listened in a way I wasn't used to. We started with dinners after long days, then weekend walks through Central Park, and eventually nights spent in each other's apartments. Michael never asked about the numbers I managed or the clients I served. He wanted to know what books I loved, why I still cooked my grandmother's recipes, why I always avoided questions about family. For months, I gave him the same deflections I gave everyone else. They're fine, just busy. Nothing much to tell. One evening in October, after 3 months of dating, he caught me off guard. We had just finished dinner at my place, and I had hung up from a short call with my mother, my answers clipped and vague. Michael set down his wine glass and asked quietly, "Why do you erase yourself around your family?" The words landed like a stone in water. I had spent years perfecting that erasure, smoothing out my life so my parents wouldn't question it, dimming my light so Ethan could stay their golden child. But Michael's gaze was steady, waiting. So I told him about the photo albums, the trophies, the necklace Ethan got while I unwrapped books. I explained why I kept my wealth a secret, that if they knew, it would only become Ethan's money in their eyes. He didn't interrupt, just listened, then leaned forward. "Living divided can't last forever," he said gently. "At some point, you'll have to decide which life you want." His words lingered long after he left that night. By the time Thanksgiving approached, I knew he was right. I couldn't keep pretending to be less than I was. I decided to bring him home with me to Boston and to stop shrinking. Even if I wasn't ready to reveal, everything, the drive from New York to Lexington, was lined with bare trees and the first traces of frost on the roadside. Michael kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting lightly over mine, as if he could sense the knot in my stomach tightening with every mile closer to home. By the time we turned onto my parents' quiet street, the sky had gone gray and the air carried that damp chill unique to Massachusetts in late November. Ethan's new Audi gleamed in the driveway, its paint still bright from the dealer's lot. I knew without asking that my parents had helped finance it. They always did. My chest tightened at the sight, but Michael only squeezed my hand. Inside, my mother swept past me to embrace Michael, her voice high with excitement at meeting him. My father clapped him on the back, asking about his practice, while I received a distracted smile and a quick pat on the shoulder. Ethan appeared a moment later, all polished confidence, and was introduced to Michael as though I were only incidental in the connection. Dinner that evening felt scripted, every line already assigned. My mother had prepared Ethan's favorite roast, and conversation orbited around his recent promotion at a Boston marketing firm. He described his corner office and the junior staff reporting to him, while my parents beamed with pride. I pushed peas across my plate, offering polite nods. My own career, once again, invisible. Later, Michael and I were shown to the small guest room, its pull-out sofa sagging in the middle. Ethan and his wife were given the larger guest suite with the queen bed and private bath. When I raised an eyebrow, my mother explained, "Ethan's back needs proper support." I said nothing, though heat rose in my chest. That night, as I passed the kitchen for water, I heard my parents speaking in hushed tones. "I just wish Selena had more ambition," my mother sighed. My father replied, "She's always been content with less. Not like Ethan." I stood frozen in the hallway, the words as sharp as they had been when I was a child, and knew the cracks in my silence were widening. Thanksgiving morning began with the smell of turkey already in the oven and my mother humming in the kitchen. I slipped outside to take a call I couldn't avoid. One of my partners finalizing terms on a deal that involved seven-figure commitments and timing the release of capital. My voice was low, measured, but I felt exposed standing there in my parents' backyard, surrounded by the same picket fences that had framed my childhood. When I hung up, Ethan was leaning against the back door, his eyes narrowed, arms crossed. "Since when does data entry involve million-dollar portfolios?" His tone carried a bite. But before I could answer, my mother called him inside to set the table. He gave me a long look before disappearing, suspicion written all over his face. Later, as we dressed for dinner, Michael mentioned our upcoming trip. "We'll be in Tokyo for 2 weeks," he told my father casually. "Selena has a client there, and we're staying on to explore." The words seemed harmless, but I saw Ethan's head snap up from across the room. He stared at me as if piecing together a puzzle he hadn't known existed. When the meal was over, I brought out the television wrapped in silver paper and a blue bow. My parents gasped as my father tore off the wrapping to reveal a 55-inch smart TV. Their old set was nearly a decade behind. "I thought the gift would be a small kindness," I said. Instead, my mother frowned. "Selena, this must have cost a fortune." "It was on sale," I lied. But the lie felt brittle. Ethan wasn't convinced. He leaned down, reading the model number off the box, then tapped furiously on his phone. $1,500, he announced, his voice sharp. "Since when can you afford this on your salary?" The room went quiet, forks clinking faintly against plates as everyone looked my way. My mask was slipping, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I had the strength, or even the desire, to put it back on. Ethan's eyes locked on mine, daring me to explain away the numbers glowing from his phone screen. My parents waited too, my mother clutching her napkin in both hands. My father froze in mid-motion with his fork. The silence stretched until I felt it pressing against my ribs. "I don't work in data entry," I said finally, my voice steady though my pulse thundered. "I own an investment firm." "We've been successful," Ethan let out a sharp laugh, half disbelief, half anger. "You've been hiding this while Mom and Dad helped me cover my car loan? While they worried about mortgage payments?" His voice rose as he scrolled furiously. "Oh my God, Forbes? 13 million. Is this a joke?" My mother gasped, her hand trembling as she reached for her water glass. My father's lips moved, but no sound came. He looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. "Do you want to know what I've been sitting on?" I asked quietly. "Let's go back. The science fair I won in middle school. You skipped it for Ethan's baseball game. My graduation speech. You filmed Ethan's reactions instead of my words. College. I worked 3 jobs while you paid his tuition in full and gave him an allowance." My parents' faces shifted from shock to a dawning, uncomfortable recognition. I pressed on. "You gave him new furniture, new cars, new beginnings. I got hand-me-downs, and you'll figure it out." And I did figure it out, without your help. Without your pride, alone. The table was silent except for Ethan's uneven breathing. His expression hardened, anger simmering past disbelief. "You're selfish," he spat. "You let us think you were nothing while you hoarded millions." I met his glare. The ledger of years laid bare between us, and for the first time, I felt no need to shrink. Ethan shoved his chair back so hard it scraped against the hardwood floor. His voice boomed across the table, rattling the glasses. 13 million. And you've never offered to help. Brad and I have been trying to buy a house for years. Mom and Dad dipped into their retirement for us, and you just sit there hoarding. My mother was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. My father's lips moved, but no sound came. He looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. "I owe nothing," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Every dollar I have came from my work, my discipline, and my choices. I built this alone." Ethan jabbed a finger toward me. "Family helps family. That's how it works." "You think you're better than us now?" Michael, who had been silent through most of the eruption, leaned forward, his calmness cutting through the noise. "From what I've seen, Selena has been giving to this family her entire life, just not with money. She's given patience, silence, and the space for everyone else to shine. Maybe it's time someone gave her the respect she's earned." Ethan's face flushed crimson, but for once he had no quick retort. My mother's sobs filled the space where words might have landed. My father just stared at me, his fork still on the plate, as if lifting it was suddenly impossible. I stood, laying my napkin beside my plate. "Michael and I will be staying at a hotel tonight." My voice did not waver. My mother reached out, pleading through tears, but I stepped back. Michael rose beside me, steady and certain. Together we walked through the dining room, past the untouched pie and the silence heavy as stone, out into the cold November air. The night sky was sharp and clear, the chill bracing on my skin. For the first time in years, the weight of my silence felt lighter, though the cost of breaking it had only just begun to show. The morning light streamed through the hotel curtains, pale and unforgiving. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. 17 new messages from Ethan, each swinging between outrage and guilt. My mother had left tearful voicemails begging me to come back, insisting we could talk it through. I silenced the phone and let the quiet settle. Not long after, a knock sounded at the door. Michael opened it to find my father standing there, rumpled and weary, yesterday's clothes still on his back. He stepped inside without meeting my eyes, then sat heavily in the desk chair. For a long moment, he said nothing, just rubbed his hands together. Finally, he looked up. "We took the easy road with Ethan," he admitted, his voice rough. "He cried. He demanded. And we gave in. You adapted. It wasn't fair, but it was easier." Hearing him name it out loud was both relief and wound. I steadied myself before answering. "It's too late to undo the past, but going forward, there are boundaries. I won't give Ethan a dime. My finances are mine, and I won't discuss them with anyone in this family. If you want a relationship with me, respect has to be equal." He nodded slowly, as if the weight of my words was finally sinking in. For the first time, I saw regret flicker behind his eyes, though no apology could erase decades of neglect. Later, as Michael and I packed, I found myself thinking of Ethan's children. None of this was their fault. I began sketching an idea in my mind, a trust fund strictly for their education, structured so Ethan could never touch it. It felt like a line between compassion and protection, the only compromise I could live with. By the time we loaded our bags into the car, the decision had hardened into something close to peace, even if the fractures at home remained raw. Months passed, and the storm quieted into something less volatile, but still fragile. My father called every few weeks, his tone cautious yet more honest than I had ever known. He asked about my work, not out of obligation, but with genuine curiosity, and admitted he had never really seen me for who I was. My mother's calls were harder, tangled with guilt and habit. She still slipped into old patterns, invoking Ethan, but sometimes caught herself and shifted, as if learning a new language slowly. Ethan I cut off entirely. His barrage of demands turned into accusations, then into silence once I blocked him. The absence felt less like loss than relief, a wound finally closed to air. I began therapy, sitting across from a woman who gave words to the years I had carried alone. Favoritism, erasure, the hunger for recognition. Piece by piece, I began to set it down. With space cleared, I found myself drawn to giving in ways that felt purposeful. I mentored young women entering finance, women who reminded me of myself at 20, determined but underestimated. I funded initiatives for girls in STEM, small acts of investment that rippled wider than I expected. Michael stood with me through it all, steady and present, never asking me to be less or more than I was. Together, we built new traditions, holidays with friends, weekends away, a community that felt chosen rather than assigned. One evening, as spring settled into the city, I hung a small brass key on the wall of our apartment. I'd had it engraved with a single word: boundaries. It caught the light from the window, a quiet emblem of everything I had reclaimed and everything I would protect going forward.